things. So
That's good.
Anyway, well, before we dive into the kind of content of our conversation, let me just pray for us real quick. God, thanks for Paul giving us his time. Thank you so much for just this truth, God, that we know and we can believe that we are image bearers, that there is something so unique about the way you made humanity. And we are thankful for that. And we are thankful that even though we make mistakes, even though we are broken to our core, God, we are loved even more deeply than that. And there is so much potential in each and every human life. Would you show us that tonight? Would you move the needle for some of us, God, towards caring for some folks that maybe we haven't in a while, or to maybe we've been mischaracterizing some people that disagree with us, that maybe we can come to a different perspective. Thanks for this conversation. Thanks for the technology to have it. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right. So Paul, as I mentioned, is the executive vice president for Save the Storks. Save the Storks is an organization that exists to serve women and save children in Jesus' name. Their unique approach and apolitical tone has seen huge success. And so we're going to talk a little bit about kind of what this looks like. But Paul, for you, I would just love for you to share a little bit of your own story and kind of how your story and this passion grew towards you joining up with Save the Storks.
It's an interesting thing. One of the things that in my life, I've never had a lack of, and it is passion. I'm not much of a marcher or things like that. I'm not like a lot of other people who care about justice, and they show their hunger and thirst for righteousness or justice by being an activist in a certain way. But I've always felt pretty passionate about things. Like I go back to this story of this guy who was a runner. One of the guys that I discipled when I was in campus ministry shared this in a sermon one time. I'm sitting in the pews listening to this guy in a church give a sermon, a guy that I had invested my life in. And he opens up the whole sermon and he says, Dean Karnatzis, he tells a story about this guy named Dean Karnatzis, was this slobbering drunk right around his 30th birthday. He's at this bar. He's up somewhere up in San Francisco. He's drinking tequilas and he's really past the limit. And he's really been successful in his life. And he's got the company car, the Lexus. He's got this really good big job at this firm, but he's extremely empty. And so he decides to slip out the back of the bar, and he goes to this. He slips out and he goes to his home. Like his home is like a block or two away, and he says he's sitting there on his porch. He sees some like Chuck Taylors, and he decides, I'm gonna run. Kind of like how you like to run and bike. He says, I'm gonna go on a run. So he strips down to his boxers and his t-shirt at 2 a.m. and starts running. And he runs, and at about 4 or 5 in the morning, he's run through all these foggy neighborhoods, and I don't know, he's gone miles and miles, and he's burping up tequila, and he's thinking, well, should I go or should I keep going? So he decides to keep going. And so he runs up Highway 1, I think, there near Veracruz or someplace, or Santa Cruz. And at 9 a.m., he decides, I really would like to see how far I've gone. I think he had gone like 20 or 30 miles. I'd really like to find out how far I can run, but I really need to go home and get some sleep, and I need to go into work and so he then decides in that experience that he was born to run. Like he had this religious experience almost for him. He decided that he just had this passion for doing this. And so he did all these different races. He would race in the desert, there in California, and then he would do all these different ultra marathons. And then one particular time he did 50 different marathons on 50 consecutive days. Wow. In 50 different states. And he ended up in New York at the New York Marathon, and then decided to run back to San Francisco. So he's like a modern day Forrest Gump. And so he does this, and I tell people this story, and I'm listening to this story of this guy. He actually just does these crazy runs, and I realize he's not passionate about fitness. I mean, I like to stay fit, but I do not like to run like that. This guy's truly passionate about running. And I'm passionate about a few things in life. I'm passionate about God. I'm passionate about my family. I'm passionate about my country. I'm passionate about Ohio State football. And I'm passionate about life and protecting women and children. I think there's something, this may sound odd, and I think it maybe sounds old school to some people, and some people might even have a hard time with this, but I think wired in men innately is this desire to protect those who are within our sphere of influence, especially women and children. You look at the Titanic, when there was this opportunity for the men to go, it was women and children first. And so there's something about us as men that we're wired to protect women and children. And so for me, this issue of life and the unborn, I don't know when I can consciously say I became passionate about it. I can tell you that I always had a negative impression of the pro-life movement, and I'm just being honest with you. I'm being real and raw, and it's probably like some people that are maybe in your fellowship there. Maybe you had this experience, but I had this idea that if I joined this movement, that I was going to look a certain way. I was going to be angry all the time. I wouldn't be invited to all the cool parties by all the cool people. But I did know that it was God, that it was something after God's heart, that there was something inherently unjust about taking the life of an innocent child, whether they were, 6 inches from one side to another side of someone's skin. And so but I didn't know how to express it. Like I said, I'm not much of a marcher. This one guy who happened to be an entrepreneur, a friend of mine, we figured out ways that we could collect these books. There's a book that a lot of people have read called What to Expect When You're Expecting. Are you familiar with that book, Phil?
Yep.
Okay, so he had this book business, and we would collect all the What to Expect When You're Expecting books, and we would take them and donate them to the local pregnancy center, the pro-life pregnancy center. And so we would do this a number of times so they could give to women who, found themselves in a crisis pregnancy. And then one day I was asked to run for office. It's this crazy thing. And it was based on a thing called the heartbeat bill. They said, Paul, we'd like for you to run against this person because they're holding up this bill in the Senate in Ohio. It already passed the House. I'm not going to say which party was holding it up, but you'd actually be surprised because politics is a crazy thing. And I knew that I was going to have to stand before God someday and give an account for the opportunities that I had. And even though I didn't want to run for public office, I felt like I owed it to what amounted to a school bus full of children that were dying every day, that this heartbeat bill did not pass. Because basically the bill is exactly how it sounds. You cannot take the life of the baby if you can detect the heartbeat. Once that baby's heartbeat is detected, it became illegal to take the life of that baby. And so I was like, here am I, Lord, send me. I'm going to do this. That was a crazy story of obedience that has rippled around to a lot of young people all across the country of saying yes to God. We were not meant to win, but what we were supposed to do is obey God. And he made it very clear. So we did that. And then God moved us out to Colorado through the job that I had with a group called the Navigators. Then one day I was looking at Facebook, and I was just, like we all do, I saw this article called how some young people with a van are changing the pro-life movement. And I thought, you know what, you got me. That's clickbait, but you got me. I'm going to see what that's about. So I clicked on it, and I saw this kid with crazy hair, like emo type hair, tattoos. And I thought, and that was the kid that was pro-life. And I thought, that's the pro-life kid? I want to find out more about what they're doing, because, that's the way I want pro-life to look. And so I read what they were doing, and I called because I wanted to give money. I thought, I want to give them some money, Phil. And so, and Phil, stop me anytime you want to for clarification, because I'll be done here in just a second with this story, part of the story. But what I tried to give some money. I thought maybe I can help them something. I didn't know what to do, but the website was having a glitch. So I pick up my cell and I call, and the guy who's the CEO, this crazy redheaded kid, that's another picture of this guy, young, answers his own phone. The CEO answers his phone. Now I thought it this massive organization. Well, it looked like a massive organization. Basically, it was an idea, Phil. And so I said, hey, listen, I want to take you to lunch tomorrow. So we went for Chinese food, and he comes in and he says, I said, tell me your story. He says, Paul, I'm up in New York City. I'm on a missions trip, just watching some young people that were standing outside of a notorious abortion clinic. Mm-hmm. And as they would come, there were no picket signs, no politics, no bullhorns, no nothing like that. Someone would just approach a girl as she was getting ready to walk up to the abortion clinic and say, would you be interested in seeing a free ultrasound on this white van parked around the corner? And I'm thinking, well, that sounds shady enough right now that I don't know how anybody would just go for that. But okay, I'm in the story. He says, the person that brought me to this place was cold and they wanted to get a coffee. So they went in for a cup of coffee at the coffee shop right there, and no one prepped him. He said, Paul, no one prepped me. I'm standing there, not part of the whole thing, minding my own business. And this 13-year-old girl comes up to me, whose name is Amanda. And Amanda says to me, Paul, I'm here for my appointment. She thought that he was an abortion clinic worker and just kind of helping him come in. He says, I'm not with this abortion clinic. I'm here with this group of young people here, and they want you to know that if you're interested in getting some free resources and an ultrasound, you're welcome to get aboard this white van parked right around the corner. And she said, okay. And he couldn't believe she said, okay. It was the craziest thing. Like, and so he walks her over there. He doesn't know what to do. She gets on board this van, this 13-year-old girl. And he says, all I knew what to do is to pray. And so while she's on that van, he's praying there, and she comes off about 40 minutes later, and she starts typing numbers into her phone. And he says, Amanda, who are you calling? She says, I'm calling my mom to tell her she's going to be a grandma. I'm going to keep this baby.
Wow.
He said, Paul, I saw 8 girls choose life that day by simply someone going up to them as they were coming in, not with any politics or protesting or anything like that, just saying, would you be interested in some free resources and a free ultrasound? And he said, I was hooked. He said, number one, I knew we got to do this in every city across the United States, and we need to do it with excellence. And so we gave birth to this idea called Save the Storks. And the rest is history. Now we have, I think, 58 of these vans across the country, meeting women right where they are at their point of need with grace and truth. And I always say that the grace is in the approach that we share, because we're all broken. Anytime you face an injustice, you can go one of 3 ways. You can go with apathy. It says there's nothing I can do, so I'm not going to do anything. You can go to anger that says that it really kind of shuts down any ingenuity or any innovation. But you can understand when you think over 60 million people have been killed through abortion, children, and the women whose lives have been forever scarred, you can understand the anger, but anger is not a great choice. The third option is we can go with our own brokenness. And we can say, I'm broken, you're broken, we're all broken, and we all need grace, and we need truth. And just like Jesus met the woman at the well, just like Jesus met Peter, just like he met Zacchaeus, we want to meet women right where they are at their biggest point of need at a very dark place, and that's in front of an abortion clinic. But we want to meet them with love and compassion.
Yeah, I mean, that's an incredible story. And I think, for a long time, I think this has just been a really, really divided conversation. And I think, one of the things we talked about this last weekend, just as a community, is I talked about like one of the challenges that I feel like is happening in a hyper polarized moment for us just in culture is that when I disagree with someone, they're not just wrong. They're not even dumb. They're evil. And so when we have something like this, I think it's always important to realize like, it's not a shame-inducing conversation, and it's not an issue. Like, we're talking about the lives of human beings created in the image of God. And that's not just the babies we're talking about. That's the moms that are carrying. That's, that's dads that didn't expect it. That's grandmas and grandpas. That's mom. That's so many different people. And so I wonder for you, like I would say one of the really unique challenges around the conversation of kind of sanctity of life, pro-life, pro-choice has been, it feels like we're sort of pitted against one another. So if you're pro-choice, you care about the mom. If you're pro-life, you care about the baby. And so I just wonder, like, how do you think about that? And how do we maybe change the conversation to say, like, I think Jesus cares really deeply about both, and I think we can too.
Yeah, it's a wonderful observation, and interestingly, I say this, it's a false narrative. I like how you worded that. And I think you and I've talked about this, about being manipulated by various things in our culture. I think this is one of the areas where the enemy is doing a great job. See, the enemy is not the person. Certainly the enemy is not the young lady or the woman. And I would even say that the enemy is not the abortion doctor or the abortion clinic or the Planned Parenthood worker. They are tools of the enemy, that abortion doctor. But that just in the same way that I need Jesus, that abortion doctor needs Jesus. And so I think we have got to step out and look at this issue as not a political issue, because it's not. Abortion is no more a political issue than sex trafficking is a political issue, or racism. Racism is not a political issue. Slavery was not a political issue. People made it that way and tried to make it that way, and they try to make abortion this way. But it is a human rights issue. And when I see a young lady, and I see the opportunity that we have to come alongside her and focus on her, and see, that's why we call it Save the Storks. We want our messaging to focus on the woman.
Yeah.
84% of women thought that we found, and their statistics can vary, but one of the statistics that we got from a guy named Randy Alcorn said that 84% of women who had an abortion thought that abortion was their only choice. So if we're going to be really pro-choice, we want to be able to say to a woman, as she's there on a stork bus, you've got three options. Right now, you can go forward and have that abortion in that clinic that you were walking right into. And we want you to know that if that's what you're going to do, we're going to be here when you come out. We want to be here and help you. If you need help, pray for you, any counseling, any grief, anything that we can do to help. We want to be here, because Phil, here's the issue. What's the alternative?
Right.
To stiff armor and say, no, we don't want anything to do with you. I don't think that's what Jesus would do. No. The shame and all that. The enemy's going to come through just fine with shame. But we want to be there as healing agents for that woman, and trust that the Holy Spirit will do the work that he says he's always done, and that's of sin and righteousness of judgment. We're frozen. Can you see me and hear me?
I can hear you still. You are frozen, but I can still hear you. Okay. You're back. There you go.
Okay. So the other option is that young lady can go forward and continue to have the baby, and she can, we can give her parenting classes. Most pregnancy resource centers all across the country offer parenting classes, diapers through several years of their life, baby clothes, all kinds of prenatal vitamins and resources. And we want them, I think the best pregnancy centers are ones that incorporate them into the life of the body of Christ, the church. So there's that option. We want to bring them in. We want to let them know they have support, that they are not alone. The third option is that there's a line a mile long. If you think you're not ready yet, a line a mile long of people that will adopt that baby or help take.
Uh-oh, we lost Paul for good, everybody. He'll come. I bet he'll be back. He'll click back in. Well, I hope this conversation has been helpful so far. He'll jump back in. We'll keep having it. I want to just re-invite you guys to ask questions, post your thoughts here. Corey, she's used a phrase that I've like, man, I just think this is such an important phrase for us, that we can be in the messy middle. And I think for too long, like on issues and conversations like this, we've been told, hey, it's like a right or a left issue. You have to be in one. And if you're not, you're doing it wrong. And you can't borrow from one platform to the other. And I'm not telling you how to vote. Like this is a conscience issue between you and God. But I think when we talk about this, figuring out like how do we care for the life of a mother, and how do we care for the life of her baby? And I think it is a challenging conversation. Like I think there is so much shame that gets wrapped up in this. There is so much weirdness and politics that get wrapped up in this. but I don't think there needs to be. So feel free to drop in, like I said, drop in comments as you look here. One of the things that Paul mentioned is crisis pregnancy centers. And so I want to direct you to kind of a couple things as we wait for him. One is if you're looking to find out more information about Save the Storks, or you want to kind of just be able to follow them on social, I'm dropping in two links in the comments that you can go find them on Facebook or find them on Instagram, and just hear some stories of how God is using them and what they're discovering as they put these vans, like really kind of like luxury buses, all around the country. Their aim is to essentially put them in places where there would be a abortion clinic across the street, and they just want to be able to offer options. And so if a young mom decides to go have an abortion, that it doesn't end their relationship, that they can still offer care, support, love, compassion, and that what they've discovered is that when women see their baby voluntarily, it's just an option through an ultrasound, that 80% of women that see their baby in one of these vans go on to choose to keep their baby. And I just think, like, I mean, whether that baby is raised by that mom, is put up for adoption, I think, like, no matter what our political perspective, we can agree that it's a good thing that those human beings are alive. Hey, and with that, I think Paul's back. Let's see here. Here we go. Boom, you're back. How you doing, sir? We can see you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? We can see you and we can hear you. So when you can hear me, you let me know.
Sorry about that. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Internet happens, man. It's a thing. So I was talking a little bit about, hey, finding crisis pregnancy centers in the area, how valuable that can be. I gave folks kind of a specific next step related to going and finding you guys on social media. And I talked about kind of the fact, one of the things you left out of your story is that the very first van that Save the Storks used was pretty shady. Like, don't go into that van. That's where people offer you candy. Like, but like the vans now are insane. They're really kind of places of hospitality. You want to talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, the only reason we really want a woman to feel safe, valued, loved, special, because it may be the first time in her life where she's felt that way. And so for us, that's a huge deal. I feel like when we have the leather chairs, sometimes they're like a chair that's like I can't get it out right all of a sudden, like a massage chair, and we have flat screen TVs, and a really nice lighting. We really want that girl to feel special, and so that's a big deal for us.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I think, figuring out, it's not a bait and switch. It's not like, hey, you better do the thing we're telling you to do. I think the heartbeat of how do we just continue to make sure that the options that are available are what's known, and that we continue to communicate not just about the fetus, not just about a baby, but for the mom too, that there's dignity, that there's value, that there's worth. And to your point, like, no matter what her experience has been up to that moment, that we get to be a part of making sure we communicate that love and compassion as well. Crystal said, I can't believe 84% of the women felt they had no other choice. It blows my mind. And I think that one of the things we live in the moment of right now, we talked about it this weekend, is that the narrative politically and the narrative that we find ourselves right now in media is so crazy polarized. And so if you end up in the wrong picture of this conversation and it becomes, hey, it's fetal tissue, and if it becomes inconvenient, just go terminate the pregnancy. I mean, it's 84% likely, right? That's the only conversation you've ever heard about this. And so being able to simply just, give some other perspective, I think that is so incredibly helpful. Melissa said, can we discuss the lack of fathers or family in the life of these babies and the effect that has on the young women? It can be lonely road without family or a partner. How can they be offered more support in that aspect? That is such a great question, Melissa. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And this is why I think the church has got to step up, and we've got to be the church. The problem of fatherlessness in and it's a socioeconomic thing. Like there's all kinds of research studies that are out there, and I did my master's thesis on this back in the day about the importance of a father in the life of a child. It cannot be. It just is important. I mean, I can't say that it's not more important than a woman's role. In no way. But it's such a huge deal that goes to the development of young women. And mine was helping like the importance of a father's role in the life of a daughter. Like certain things that you wouldn't even think of that literally or scientifically happen physiologically to girls' bodies that in a correlation without a father happen sooner, and the things that we don't want happen sooner. Like so there's that, and I feel like pregnancy centers and the church and Save the Storks, we want to actually provide that help, and so we're there for the dad too. Like you're going to see some things coming up if you follow Save the Storks in our social media about fathers and about how it affects a dad too. Like abortion doesn't just a woman, and we have stories where where a woman would come up to me and she would say, "Where were you with that van when I had my 3 or 4 abortions?"
Wow.
Like where I needed you there, like with tears coming down her eyes. And there's not a whole lot that I can say other than God's grace and man, we love you, and just know that God is a God of redemption. Some of those women literally, because of what happened in the abortion clinic, can't even take the sound of a vacuum cleaner. Like it sends them into a PTSD. They literally can't handle the sound of a vacuum cleaner. For men, though, as you'll see if you follow Save the Storks, it is a crushing blow to some of these men. And we've talked to them. We had recently we were at a conference for men, and they came up and they wanted to see the stork bus. And they waited in line for 2 hours. There was such a long line to see it. And they knelt down to the speaker. She was a female. Her name's Victoria. They knelt down to Victoria and they said, I want you to know that I drove a young lady to have an abortion. I've never told anybody before, with tears coming down their eyes. And we have to, instead of howling at the moon and yelling in the wind, we have to stay.
Oh, we lost him again. He'll come back. He'll come back, everybody. Ooh, yeah. I mean, I think as we kind of process some of this stuff and figuring out like what does it look like in local levels, right? There are these networks of pregnancy centers all around the country. Right here in our own community, Alternatives Pregnancy Center, it's designed to do what Paul is talking about. If you're watching this somewhere else, it's available there too. Let's see. We got him back. I think we got him. Hold on. Ready? Here we go. Paul,
Just
you
so
back?
you know, the enemy does not want this thing to happen. Just so you know.
Shoot, man. Yeah, no, that's. I think that. No, I think that figuring out. I think part of the challenge that we have around fatherlessness is figuring out like what does it mean to make sure that there is enough community support that mom and that dad, whoever it is, like that they really genuinely feel like you're not doing this alone. And I think the church can help with that. I think pregnancy centers can help with that. And I think a lot of times in the situation, especially like teen pregnancy, just finding ways to destigmatize this, that if it's a young girl like in our community, how do we make sure that we lead with love and compassion and kindness? And it's not a scarlet letter that they have to carry around every time we see them.
One of the commenters, Phil, that I saw a few minutes ago said, we've got to be in the messy middle. Did you see that?
Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm, yep.
Okay.
That was,
so
yeah.
this is really messy ministry. I mean, it just is. We're trying to figure out a fourth option. Actually, now I told you we have 3 options right now.
Right.
That right now I'm dreaming, I'm working, I feel like that God is doing a great thing in the hearts of the church and couples and families with this idea of foster care. The problem with foster care, I'm getting ready to say something that it just blows me away. When young people age out of the foster care system, I think it's 85 to 90% of young people that age out of the foster care system are incarcerated within 1 year.
Wow.
So our foster care system, it's broken, okay? And the church, people in the church, we've got some creative things that are happening out there. There's a wonderful group that we absolutely love called Safe Families.
Yep.
And they do a great thing. They do great things. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, Phil, but
Yeah. I worked with them at the church I was at in Seattle, actually.
Okay, so great group. What we're trying to have for a woman who's facing an abortion, who may feel pressured. Listen, because here's the crazy thing: the young lady that was just getting ready to go to have abortion now is faced with an adoption. She's like, "No way will I give up my baby. Like, I've just seen a picture of my baby. I can't. I don't want to lose my baby." And so it's kind of almost counterintuitive that she would have been thinking about having an abortion. However, if we put ourselves in her shoes now, we understand there's this thing of, I don't want to say goodbye to this forever, but she may not be ready. She may have been in an abusive situation with a guy, or she may be homeless, or she may have some other situation that, like, without a job. And so the idea of to having to make a decision where I lose custody of this child, I think is too much to bear. And so then you have, that goes to some of these questions that we have as far as the pro-life. All you care about is that baby. You don't care about the mom. You don't care about the dad. Well, what if we as the church would have a program, and we're developing this, we're praying through all because it's not just a snap your finger and make it happen. There's a lot of issues. But what if we had 2 couples per church that say, hey, listen, we're going to step up. And if there's a woman in crisis who needs a place to give her baby without losing custody, without it going into the foster care system, we're going to be there. We're going to be like Safe Families, and we're going to be a welcome home to this baby. And we're going to take care of it. And within a month or 2 or 6 months or however long it takes, that woman we're going to make sure that she is supported by us taking care of her child. And maybe a Sunday school class or a small group says, we're going to take care of the formula. And maybe another group says, and we're going to take care of the diapers. And the youth group says, we're going to take care of the clothes. So we've got these things that, if we're going to be the church, we need to be really willing to step up and get messy.
No, that's really good. I think that's I don't think any of these problems get solved if we just say, let's do what we're already doing, but matter, right? Like every perspective,
Yeah.
I think that feels like the answer right now. Like, oh, this is my perspective. I'll just get more mad. Oh, that's your perspective. You just get more. I bet this will fix it.
Yeah.
And we know it's not fixing it. But Dawn's got a great question here, a little bit off of what you talked about. She said, I'd love to learn how to respond to comments about the foster system being overwhelmed with unwanted children and many children living nightmares of abuse in foster homes. Isn't it better to not bring more kids into those situations, or moms who won't or can't give up addiction during the pregnancy? What would you say to that kind of line of reason?
Yeah, that's such an amazing question. And I think if we think in those terms, and I'm asking God right now for wisdom as I answer, because I don't want to give a knee-jerk response. I know that there's abuse in this world that's outside the foster care system too. So let's say human trafficking, sex trafficking. I know that there's she's talking about like abusive situations, I think, and drug addiction, and these things that are just so broken and so complex. The complex. I know this, and I got to be careful when I say this because I don't want to in any way minimize that question. Please hear my heart. And Phil, I think you and I have talked enough. You know that I'm not going to dismiss the question. But I heard a great man once said, he goes, it's never right to do wrong in order to get a chance to do right. So I'm for, I mean, we think of the stuff that we're watching in the world today. And it's just broken. Like I know that let's even talk about fair wage for people who work in sweatshops. Well, how do I handle that? How do I handle kids working in bad conditions? And do I say, oh, I don't bring kids into the world because of that, and should I abort these children? Or I just know that we as the church, this is why we approach the world not from anger and injustice, not with anger, but we approach it with brokenness. And that's when I think God's heart and his love for them and his love for us and his love to make the world new and redeem these situations. When we approach it from our own brokenness, I think we can become innovative. We can figure out how to fix these situations. But it's going to require us getting messy a little bit. Let me give you a case in point. So when I led some college students in campus ministry, there was a place that people would go before they went home, before they were actually living in a car, like homeless or living on the streets, and like they've been evicted from an apartment. There's this home that if they could go. When I say a home, it was like an apartment complex, but it was rough. I mean, it was rough. There may have been 8 or 10 families living in these little apartments in there, and it didn't smell nice. No one had clothes like the kids that were at the University of Dayton there that were paying for $45,000 for their education. It just was rough. And you know what we would do? Me and the college students and this lady, we would go in and we would tutor these kids 2 or 3 times a week. We would go because these kids' parents weren't tutoring them. They were broken. Literally, Phil, and not to be crass, but one time we went in and we knocked on the door because, let's say it was John. John wasn't out there ready with his books to study with us in this main little area that we would all kind of work together in. So I knock on his door, and he opens the door, and it was either the mom or the dad just passed out naked on the floor. That kind of brokenness, it's just broken. And so what happened is we came along and we started just investing in these kids' lives. And then we'd play kickball or something with them and just show them love, like it's amazing. Well, out of that group birthed them. One of the things we noticed is these kids didn't have shoes. They wouldn't get new shoes ever, or even used shoes. They didn't have anybody that cared enough to get them new shoes, and let alone socks. And so they would be cutting the edges out of the ends of their shoes. And so we just worked with Payless, and we said, hey, we want to buy some shoes. Can we get them at like a really good discount? Because we've got these kids that we're working with. Out of that idea of these kids need shoes was birthed an entire ministry that has put tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of shoes on children's and young people in high school, these kids' feet. So what we do is we would go in after this thing got up and going. It was called Shoes for the Shoeless. We started this meeting called Shoes for the Shoeless. We would go in with a box of shoes, a brand new pair of socks, and a New Testament Bible. And one of the schools said, no, we don't want the New Testament Bible. I said, then they don't get shoes. Now, that's just the way they do. They were like, are you really going to say no to this kid who needs shoes because you don't want us bringing a New Testament? If he wants to toss it, that's fine. But what kind of a sick person won't let a kid have shoes because you don't want them to have a Bible? So I know some people might say, well, they shouldn't have given the Bible. Well, that was one of the things we were going to die on. We wanted them to have a Bible. So we would go in and we would sit down across from them, and we would take their socks off with them and put new socks on. I got to tell you something. You talk about a gag reflex. These kids hadn't had their socks washed in probably months. brand new, yeah, and tears coming down, not their eyes, my eyes, as I'm meeting a felt need of these kids. And I take the shoes that have been cut out so that they can play basketball. I don't know how they were playing ball, but because their feet were too big for the shoes. And we just put a new pair of fresh socks and shoes on these kids and gave them a Bible and told them we loved them. That's what approaching issues that we say, I don't know what the answer is, but God help me fix this brokenness. That's what can happen.
When I think like, I mean, I don't know. I think about it a little bit, when I sit down with a couple that's in crisis and they're asking for marriage counseling, and I just say like, it's good. It took you more than an hour to get into the mess you're in. It's going to take us more than an hour to get you out of it. And like, it would be easier. It would be easier to just be like, you guys should just get divorced. Like, it'd be way easier, but not better. And I think when you have complex issues, they're going to require complex solutions. And I think to your point, Don, like there's a work, I think, of what does it mean for the church to be faithful in this season, in the messy middle of trying to work for solutions. There's an organization real close to us called Project 127 from the book of James. And it's all about like, how do we make it, how do we change the conversation so that there's actually a family waiting for every child in need? And, I think that's a part of it. I think some of the like specific tangible things we can do to care for families in our community, I think just being more aware of people around us that are at risk, that are in danger, not just living with our head in the ground. But I don't think it's either or. Like, I don't think it's, hey, this is really bad, so let's just keep aborting babies. Or, hey, let's save babies, but ignore the conditions that they're going to be born into. I think the challenge of the church is both.
Yeah, and see, Phil, the thing of it is, if I view abortion as only affecting the baby, then then the question has a lot more weight. But
Right.
if I also realize that that abortion is going to affect that woman for the rest of her life, and
Right.
not in a positive way, I personally have never heard of anybody except a celebrity who I felt was trying really hard to justify her abortion. I've never met someone, no one has ever come up to me and said, man, I'm so thankful that I had that abortion, because I got to tell you something, I've had a hard life. But what I have had over and over again is, I'm so, so glad that I didn't take the life of my child. And then they look over and tears start coming down their eyes, and they look at this little toddler that's over there playing. And I have a friend named Ryan, and Ryan is a product of rape. He's one of those people that everybody tries to use. Well, what if, in the case of rape, he's a biracial guy. He is unbelievable. He has a ministry, a national ministry now. And Ryan is one of those guys that you're like, his mom could have said, nah. And she chose life. And Ryan is touching the lives of thousands of people every year.
Well, I always think about like, we think about all these problems that we face as a global, as a global population. And I just think like, how many times have we killed the cure for cancer?
Oh,
Like a little boy or a little girl that God's going to raise up to solve some of the greatest problems we face in the world. And we never gave him a chance.
The next Billy Graham, the next Martin Luther King Jr.
I mean, you and I were talking about this a little bit, right? That for good reason, right? Like we shut down the universe over the last few months, right? And we did it for COVID, and like it's a real thing that is affecting a ton of people and took a ton of lives. But if we had a global health crisis that was taking a fraction of the lives that abortion is taking, I mean, what we've done for COVID would look like nothing. And we're like, that's happening all around us all the time. And we're kind of doing nothing right now.
Yeah. And that's not to say, I hear your heart, and I want everybody to hear your heart, and that because I think it's clear. We want to take care of the vulnerable. We want to protect the vulnerable. And if we really want to do that and be consistent in our sanctity of life stance, we want to say, hey, 10%, because we figured around 100,000, a million children in the U.S. are aborted every year. So 10% of that 1 million have died this year to COVID, but 1 million children and a disproportionate number of Black children. The enemy targets the the minority community in this very strategically. And because I forget the statistic on this one, so don't quote me on it, but it's an overwhelming statistic that Planned Parenthood and abortion clinics are strategically located within walking distance of minority communities.
Well, and I'm not
yeah.
I'm not throwing Planned Parenthood to this today, but like we've been talking about this framework on these issues that are more controversial, right? Learn, that's your responsibility to go educate yourself. Listen, this is not an issue. These are people, and lean in. Even with people you disagree with, how do you show up with the fruit of the Spirit, not of the works of the flesh, in difficult conversations? And I'm just telling you, if you go, for anybody watching, if you go do some research, like go learn. I'm not going to give you an article. I'm not going to give you a biased perspective. Just go learn about the origins of Planned Parenthood. It is devastating.
It is.
We just don't talk about it.
And again, let's remind ourselves again that are those people in that clinic, are they the enemy? And we would say no. They're being used by the enemy. And that's one of the things why I work with Abby Johnson and her ministry. I support her. Where they go in and see they're doing something. They go in and they offer women, they'll say, hey, if you are interested in getting out of the industry, we want you to know that we love you and we'll support you. We'll give you 3 months paid severance. We will pay for a spiritual retreat. We will help you get a new job. And they put their money where their mouth is. I mean, and they've had hundreds of people walk away, including abortion doctors, not by holding a picket sign,
right,
but by saying, hey, we love you and we want to help. What would it take?
Right. Absolutely. Vicky had a question for you. She said, are you able to get into schools with information, or are you not really, is that not an option for you? Are there other avenues to reach women other than just near the abortion clinics?
Yes. The issue of schools is an interesting one because it's funny. Again, I'm just going to state the facts. Planned Parenthood is in all the schools, and Planned Parenthood has a curriculum that they teach. You got to have a plan when you face an unplanned pregnancy, and that plan always includes Planned Parenthood. Interestingly enough, I did a research on this, and it's likely that you may not believe me, but I'm going to ask you to go to Consumer Report. Maybe type in Google Consumer Report. Okay, here we go. We're all mature adults here, right? Planned Parenthood, Consumer Report, condoms. Planned Parenthood passed out the most ineffective condoms, the condoms that broke the most. Why? Because when they did that, it increased their business. It is a money-making machine. And so it would say like, hey, if we give these condoms out, we know they're not the top of the line, but so they fail. We're not in the schools. Pro-life is not looked very highly upon in the schools. Chastity or what's the word, Phil? Help me out. I can't. Abstinence.
Sure.
Education is not really welcome in the schools, but there are some pregnancy centers that have such a good reputation, and they give there's down here in Colorado Springs, and I know one in Raleigh, and I know that all over the country they've got these people that are effectively able to communicate a sexual ethic where they strip it of all the spirituality, but they just teach it, A plus B equals C. And so in that case, they're able to get into schools. But Save the Storks as an organization is not in the schools. But I actually think it's an interesting idea.
That's great. Our family pastor, her name is Shannon. She said, I also think as the church, we need to do a better job of loving and celebrating the young mom who chose life, not shaming them for the sin that resulted in a pregnancy, but celebrating the blessing of a baby and supporting them as a new mom. Absolutely. And I think we're so good at that when it's like a mom that fits within our box. And I think we have to be careful not to throw that out when that mom simply doesn't fit into our box.
So Shannon and Phil, you can weigh in on this as well. I think some of what we've done with shame has been misguided, obviously, because we would say shame does not come from God. But guilt, or conviction comes from the Holy Spirit, but not shame. But I think sometimes we're so afraid, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that maybe, just maybe, we would incentivize the wrong behavior if we celebrate life for some reason from
Mm,
the girl who's finding herself in this situation. Do you
sure.
think that that's been somewhat of the mentality?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's at least a rationalization for sure.
Okay, so one of the things that one of the groups that we strongly believe in, that we're forming a deeper partnership, is with a group called Embrace Grace. And Phil, you all can Google Embrace Grace, but Save the Storks is moving forward with them. We love the young lady who founded it. She might be my age. I say young, but I don't think she's quite my age. Her name's Amy Ford. But Embrace Grace will take a young woman who's chosen life, and they'll throw her a baby shower, and they'll put a tiara on her head, and they'll bring her through all kinds of like curriculum, and just pour into her and love on her. Embrace Grace is a great ministry for your church to be a part of. That does
That's,
exactly what Shannon was just talking about. The
that's
opposite
good.
of shame.
Yeah, that's awesome. Eileen had an interesting question. So you said, I'm curious, do fathers who see the ultrasound change their hearts as well? I'd love to hear more about the resources you spoke about that are
Yeah.
offered to fathers. Just thinking, if fathers also receive support to address their fears and misconceptions, then the mother and father could get closer to being on the same page and the path forward, like parent counseling.
So who is that? Eileen?
Eileen, yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Eileen, I want to tell you a story. I think you're going to like this one. And Phil, I don't think I've shared this story with you. Down in Albuquerque, New Mexico. New Mexico is one of the most progressive states when it comes to abortion laws. Albuquerque actually has a thing called abortion tourism, where they will fly people in from all over the country, because you can have an abortion all the way up to the birth of the baby. It's like a third trimester abortion. Most of the country has said this is not acceptable, but Albuquerque is like big into this. Well, in Albuquerque, our affiliate there, our Pregnancy Resource Center, they do amazing work, and they have a stork bus, and they're parked across the street from this abortion clinic. And a young man and woman go in to have, they pull up, they go in to have the abortion. The sidewalk counselors were not able to connect with them, and so they're inside. The father comes out, the significant other comes out, and he grabs a smoke. And so he's standing there, and he sees across the way, he sees this Mercedes Sprinter with this wrap on it. He's wondering, and he sees some people, and they're kind of doing this kind of thing. And he walks across the street, and he starts engaging with them. Well, out walks the mother of the child, the young lady that he's with, that he brought to have the abortion. And she came out for a smoke because they hadn't finished preparing the procedure room. So just know that God's providence timing is occurring right here. They're not, the procedure rooms has to be wiped down. It's not completely ready. She goes out for a smoke, sees the boyfriend. Boyfriend waves her over. They start engaging with the people there, the winsome, loving people, not people with signs, not people, with a bullhorn. Just having a wonderful conversation. They said, if you want, it's not going to hurt you at all. I mean, if you want to have an ultrasound, you're welcome to hop on board, and it's not, you got nothing to lose. They get on board this stork bus. They both, dad, significant other, and girl, they get on there. They see the image of the baby. They hear the heartbeat in surround sound. They look at each other and they say, we can't do this. This is our baby. They said, do you have any scissors? I want to cut this armband off. She had already been admitted and had an armband on. She goes, do you have a scissors that I can cut this thing off? They go, yeah, give me a second. They turn around. They can't find the scissors quick enough. She rips it off her arm. And 45 minutes later, those people led that young couple to faith in Jesus Christ.
Wow.
Now, you talk about a story. That's what gets me up in the morning.
Yeah.
Not only did we meet a felt need, not only do we save a physical life, mom and dad find Jesus Christ and break the chain and the pattern of just generational sin.
That's incredible. Well, and I think there is pressure. I think sometimes if somebody decides to choose life, decides to keep a baby, I do think we have perpetuated this idea that, hey, you probably should have been married when you had the baby, should have been married when you decided to have sex. And so Crystal said, like, I think she's kind of offering this like additional caution that we shouldn't force marriage on her after just because she chose to give up everything for this unborn child. I think that's true. Like I think this idea of like, hey, here's the thing we need to like fit you into. And I think that sometimes that's the pressure that can come if it's been a faith group that's maybe been the reason or the way that kind of God's shown up and made you think about keeping that baby.
Crystal, that's an excellent point. And that's an excellent point, Phil.
And I know I've like listened to stuff you've said. So I know this one, like you don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but I agree with you, Peggy. Peggy says grace wins. Those who scream at the women in crisis are most likely perpetuating the shame of those women. Like I just think like I get it. And I know people that are sign holding, yelling outside of abortion clinics, but it's like, man, like just think about like those women are not walking in there like feeling awesome about what's about to happen.
No.
And you're making them feel even worse.
And isn't that true of almost any brokenness that we face and again, sin is not a trendy word these days, but I think about how Jesus approached people.
Right.
Do we ever see Jesus doing that except I think one time the religious hypocrites in the temple.
Right.
But when it comes to Mary Magdalene, when it comes to even Peter, who was one of the 12, or even Judas, I mean, he was gentle. I agree. Was it Crystal that said that?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, that's good.
I agree.
Melissa's got a good question for us. She said, how are the medical costs approached for these women? The financial fears are real if they do not have insurance.
Yeah. This is a great question. I would say that for the pregnancy resource centers, everything is free. So you're getting free, prenatal care, free clothing, free. But when it comes to the actual OBGYN, which is I think what Melissa's referring to, is there's no lack of funds that I found among the kingdom of God, people who are passionate about life. They're going to figure out a way. They're going to either help her find the government funding that she needs, or they're going to chip in and do it. And that's the church being the church. I don't think that you think about your church. Do you think that if some lady came up and said, listen, I've chosen life. I have no insurance. And if I don't, literally I'm facing having to abort this child because I know that's going to cost money. That, by the way, that costs money too. That's a real moneymaker. But so I'm either going to do this or I'm going to have to face this. I want to have a baby, but I still don't have the money. Do you think that your church, Bill, would say, be warm and well fed?
Right.
No.
Well, and
we're going to find a way.
And I think there are challenges because not for every woman that's considering, with an unplanned pregnancy, considering whether or not they're going to keep the baby or have an abortion. But I think for a large section of women in really difficult socioeconomic environments, they may not either have a church like ours close or be connected to one. And so I think it's just important to realize, like, to your point, that there's support, even like from a government perspective, for the kind of care, whether it's to end the life of their child or to give birth. There's no hospital in the country that would turn you away. So, I mean, it's a messy situation. Our hope would be that there would be churches and people that would be able to reach in and help. But I think it is a misnomer to say abortion is free, having a child costs money. Both of them have costs. And I think the partnership between what's available in local medical centers plus local pregnancy centers, plus hopefully the local church, I think we can really begin to change the conversation for these moms and families.
Imagine, and this happens every day when women choose life at pregnancy centers all across the United States, of which there are 800 of these pregnancy centers have medical credentials. So they're not just this doily, nice little place that can't do anything. Like, they're really 800 of these are actually what we call medical.
Hmm.
These places, you have women who every day will look at a woman in the eye and say, what do you need? How can we help?
Right.
And they've got an army. I don't like necessarily use the word army, but they've got a host of donors that are stepping up and writing checks to make sure that we value that life and that woman.
Yeah.
That woman,
Yeah.
because it's about her too.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's really good. I think, one of the things here, that's an interesting question. Beth said, I'd love to know how the clinic personnel, I'm assuming she's talking about Planned Parenthood and abortion clinics, interact with the Stork Bus personnel, because obviously they're across the street from one another. Do they have typical relationships? Do they just kind of avoid each other?
Yeah, that's actually a really fun question to answer. The Stork Bus does not want to be a place of confrontation. They want it to be a place of grace and love. And so, because you want the abortion clinic workers to feel the same love, and just because the Bible says they're going to know we're Christians, not because of our posts or not because of our picket signs, but because of our love.
Right.
And there's a place in Florida that I love to tell the story about. The guy's name, if I can get his name right, it's Emi Azim, and I'm really close there. If I'm not, Eli Azim, I think is his name, a doctor, abortion doctor, who would perform abortions. There's a Stork Bus right across the street there in Florida. Would meet the women. Some of the women would go forward and have an abortion. Some of the women just went and had abortions. But the doctor one time contacted the pregnancy center director and said, "I need you to come. We want to meet with you." Well, they immediately contacted one of us and said, "Should we do this? Is this a setup? What's going on?" And we said, "Well, I don't know. This isn't one of the for the lawyers, you know." And so she said, "You know what? I feel like God is leading me to go in." So she goes in and sits down. He says, "Listen," he goes, "a lot of the women that come in here, I'm talking to, and a lot of them aren't ready. They're not ready to have an abortion. We talked to them, and I want to know if I can refer them out to you, because I've seen the way you all treat these women, and I've seen the way some, and I'd really like the way you approach it. Would you mind if I run across any of these young women that are just I sense they're not sure? Can I send them out to you?"
Wow.
Well, yeah. And I think that's the goal. That's the goal.
Yeah. And I think, what I don't want anybody watching this to think, whether this is somebody that like you tuned in and you're like, finally, tell them to stop killing babies, forget about the women, just stop killing babies. Like, I want you to realize there's a human being on the other side of this conversation, oftentimes in a very complex situation, and it is not as cut and dry. There is a messy middle of care and concern. And I think as passionate as we are about saving babies, we have to be that passionate about caring for the women that are involved. So Wednesday, we're going to have a conversation about poverty. Thursday, we're going to have a conversation about sexuality. These are interconnected issues. Friday, we're going to have a conversation about race. Like, these are all interconnected issues. And so if this is like your hobby horse and you're like, I don't really care about the others, just this one, we will not change this one if we don't talk about the other ones.
That's true.
And so, this weekend we talked about how we live in a political system where more progressive Democrats would resonate with the compassion of Jesus. More conservative Republicans would resonate with the conviction of Jesus. But Jesus is compassion and conviction. He's both. And so how do we show up in a way that, it's going to be countercultural to the way many people think, but how do we show up in a way that does that well?
Yeah.
So I think, folks are just even talking about some of the messiness of this, because that's the other part of this. Like, this is not easy. So we talk about women in poverty. Like, it's going to be challenging for them with or without a baby. And so how do we care for them? We're going to talk about that on Wednesday, how we think about that. But I'd love, Paul, we've been at it here for a little while. If there's any kind of like parting thoughts or perspectives that you want to share, just, kind of to leave people with one last thought or perspective from you.
Yeah. Save the Storks, when we think about what we're trying to accomplish, I sometimes I'll share the story of this yachting group in New Zealand, and they had lost the America's Cup over and over again. They wanted to win it back. It's a big deal for them to win this sailing cup. It's called the America's Trophy, I think is what it's called. America's Cup Trophy. And so they had lost. They hired this guy to win it back. And basically, to make a long story short, he took every decision they make. And there are hundreds of factors that go into success. And he said, we're not going to fool around with all these other things. What we're going to focus on is this. Will what we're doing make the boat go faster? And every decision they made and every approach to the race went through the filter of, will this make the boat go faster? And because they did that, they won back-to-back trophies in 95 and 2000. Now, you say, why in the world are you talking about yachting as it relates to pro-life? And here's why I say this. I want to know will it make, as it relates to life and the sanctity of life, what is my will it make the boat go faster question? Is it, do I want to win a culture war? Hey, I want to win the hearts and minds of people. I really do. And I think we can with our love, but that's not my number one goal right now. And do we want to win a political debate? And I would say that's not what I'm trying about, because we've tried to get certain people elected, and we've done a good job here and there and put different justices on Supreme Courts, but we still have taken the life of 60 million children. So for me, the question is this: will what I'm doing save lives? Will it save the lives of these women and these children? And will we do it the way that Jesus did? Because that's a big part of it too.
Right.
And just as the Underground Railroad was to free slaves and to get them into freedom, and just as the hiding place in Nazi Germany was a place that they would go and hide and free Jews from the Holocaust, Save the Storks is going to take a van with an ultrasound machine and some surround sound where they can hear that beautiful heartbeat. And we're going to partner with people like you, the church, and pregnancy centers all over the country, and we're going to save the lives of women and children. And one day I'm going to stand with people lock arms with people like you. I'm going to have my kids and my grandkids and hopefully my great grandkids, and we're going to go through what used to be an abortion clinic, only now it's going to be a daycare center, or it's going to be a real women's clinic, or maybe it'll be like a place that I visited, a museum like I visited when I was in Germany in Dachau. And we're going to look around and we're going to see all the images of what we allowed to take place during this dark time of our history. And invariably, one of my great grandkids is going to say, Papa, what was going on during this time? And how was this allowed to happen? And what did you do? And I'll be able to look him in the eye and I'll say, I want you to know, little guy, that your mama and me and some young people with a van and some people from that church in Denver and Aurora, we loved on women. And we saw change in our day. I think we can do this as a church. I see a day when it doesn't happen anymore.
I love that. And I think, the thing I so appreciate about your perspective, Paul, and Save the Storks is that I think for a lot of people on this issue, the way to get there in their head is as simple as a Supreme Court decision, right? But that will not solve this. Like, even if the Supreme Court came out tomorrow and said abortion's not a thing anymore, all of the systemic reasons by which women are facing these challenges, they all still exist. And so we have to figure out, how do we address poverty? How do we address the sexual ethic crisis in our world? And how do we address racial injustice and figure out, like, man, this all works together, and essentially starve out the need for people to feel like their only option is abortion.
We want to make it unthinkable and unimaginable, not just unlawful.
Absolutely. Well, Paul, I can't thank you enough, man. I know there's a lot of people just saying, what's up? Thank you so much. James, good guy, awesome guy. Shannon, thanks so much. Mike, thank you. Mark, thank you. Really, really appreciate it, Paul. Folks want to follow Save the Storks. I've put it inside the comments, so go follow them on all the social media. Grab their stuff. This has been such a great conversation to kick off our community conversations this week, Paul. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for the opportunity. Love you guys. Thank you.
All right, everybody. We will see you Wednesday night at 8 o'clock for our next community conversation. God bless.